Hello, I'm your host Sarah, and this is Insane. Salam and welcome to this new episode of Insane. As promised, we're going to be discussing self-awareness in the context of well-being from an Islamic perspective. Now, I've divided self-awareness into two categories or parts. The first one being associated with being aware of who you are, which includes what you consist of and the relevance of that to your well-being. And the second part will discuss the awareness of your human purpose of being here and how that relates to your well-being. So in this episode, I'm going to discuss what's known as the 5 aspects of the human in relations to well-being. And inshallah, in the upcoming episode, I'll discuss human purpose in a lot of depth. Now, let's start with the 5 aspects of man. This understanding and philosophy is found within the works of Imam al-Ghazali in his book Al-Ahya, or The Revival. I highly recommend reading this book. So, what do you consist of? The human being consists of the heart, the intellect, the soul, the spirit, and of course, the body. And the way that you should see these faculties is always being mindful that within the Islamic context, or the context of God, these faculties were bestowed upon you in order for you to reach the ultimate wisdom of the truth of God, and in doing so, fulfill your human purpose. So being aware of these aspects of who you are leads to you being aware of God. So you can straight away see in the Islamic context, self-awareness isn't just being aware of yourself for the sake of it, for the sake of your own development, although that does have a very large role. But the ultimate aim of self-awareness and knowing yourself is to know God. And this is supported by a verse in the Quran, Surah 41, Ayah 53. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. So this indicates self-awareness should lead to the awareness of God and the truth of God. And in turn, this results in feelings of well-being, peace, contentment, etc. So let's discuss the heart first. Now, obviously, the heart is a muscle in the left-hand side of your chest that pumps blood around the body, and it's very important. But within the Islamic understanding, the heart has a significant second role. Al-Ghazali describes the heart as the throne to knowledge, acting as a bridge between the unseen and the seen world. And the heart is where the truth of knowledge is received and understood. If the heart is clean, then your connection with God is greater, and the connection with the unseen world and the realities of this world, which includes the unseen world, informs how you behave. And this means that you live a life that is more true to the truth of reality. And this in turn leads to enhanced well-being. To explain this, Al-Ghazali compares the heart to a mirror that reflects the unseen world. And bad deeds and sins act as dust do on a mirror surface, and they obstruct your connection with the unseen world. And so you lose the connection with God and with reality and the truth. And this leads to much agitation and suffering. And the only way around this is to do good action and engage in the remembrance of Allah and also ask for forgiveness for any sins. So you can straight away see the connection between good actions, remembrance of God, your heart, and your well-being. So here again, in the Islamic perspective, wellness and well-being is not just grounded upon your heart beating in terms of like exercise and ensuring that your blood circulation is good, but also there's a spiritual aspect to it, there's a godly aspect to it, there's a moral aspect to it, there's an ethical aspect to it. It informs your character in that doing good and acting good is good for your heart and informs your well-being status. Now let's go on to the second aspect, and this is the intellect. Now we talked about the heart being the seat of knowledge because you receive inspired truth through the heart. And of course, knowledge also includes the intellect. And you can see that there are many verses in the Quran that push the human, the reader, to engage with their mind. أَوَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, do you not see? Do you not think? Do you not understand? So the Quran is always getting you to use your head, because within the Islamic understanding, knowledge leads to God. All knowledge leads to God. Physics, chemistry, biology, astronomy, all of it leads to the truth of God. And according to Al-Ghazali, there's only two situations or instances in which a person does not believe in God. It's ignorance, and if ignorance is not a reason because the person is knowledgeable, then it's arrogance. So kufr, disbelief, belongs to either one of these two categories. You're either not knowledgeable enough or not thinking enough about yourself, about creation, or if you have that knowledge, it's arrogance that prevents you from bowing down to God. And knowledge is really important because you cannot know yourself and then know God without knowing who you are worshipping and why you are here. Knowledge of God makes things much easier for you, makes reliance on Him easier, makes patience easier, makes worship easier. When you sit there and you think about God and how He's created everything, and you take time to think about the galaxy and the billions of stars and the solar system and the planets and how this earth is just floating in this mass of blackness that no one understands what it's composed of and how it's just there hovering, you see the greatness of God, and it makes it easier for you to be humble and to accept your decree and to be comforted by His power. The more one uses their intellect in the correct way, the more enhanced their well-being, because the closer they get to God. According to Al-Ghazali, there are four main sources of knowledge. One is knowing God, the second is creation, the third is the unseen world, and the fourth is knowing oneself. If you take time in knowing about these four sources, you will attain proximity and closeness to God, and this will in turn enhance your well-being. Al-Ghazali states that the purpose of a human in life is the acquisition of knowledge and wisdom. And the most honourable of knowledge is that of God, His attributes and actions. For with it a person becomes wholesome, and in a person's feelings of wholesomeness, therein lies his happiness. So you can see we are a faith that encourages knowledge. There's many things that indicate that, not just the Quranic verses, but also our understanding that the first thing God created was the pen. And the first word of revelation to our prophet was read. It could have been anything. It could have been one, as in one God. It could have been Allah. It could have been Islam. But it wasn't. It was read. So knowledge is integral for your well-being. You should see it that way. You should see that the reason why you're unhappy and anxious and sad is largely to do with your ignorance of yourself, of this world, of God, of the unseen world, and also like heedlessness. Be mindful of these things. A lot of us have knowledge, but we forget about it. We become distracted by this world. And that's why it's always good to remind yourself of these things. And you should see it from a wellness perspective, because this faith has been sent to make you feel at ease and content. God says that it's good news, that it's a medicine. You should see your faith and engage in the world in that way. So the third aspect is the soul. Now, the soul is completely missing in contemporary narratives on well-being, but in Islam it's very much prominent and present, especially in the well-being context. So there are 3 states in which your soul can be in. The first one is the self-reproaching soul, al-nafs al-lawama. The second state is the tranquil soul, al-nafs al-mutma'inna. And the third one is the commanding soul, al-nafs al-ammar. Now, before I go on, I want to state that you don't necessarily go through these states in this order, and that you can go through these states at any one moment in time, or you can stay fixed and stuck in a state for years. And some people are stuck in one state for their whole lives. Your aim as a Muslim and as someone who's seeking contentment is to remain in the state of the tranquil state. However, your standby mode is al-nafs al-ammara, the commanding soul. Now, the soul commands to do wrong. Even the Prophet Yusuf said, وَمَا أَبَرُّ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. And I don't seek to absolve my own soul, for the soul commands to do wrong. إِلَّا مَنْ رَحْمَ رَبِّي, except that soul that God has mercy upon. So your standby mode in terms of your soul is to command you to do wrong. And to do wrong here means to satisfy your desires and your cravings, to go against that which God calls for, which is always enlightenment. If you look at the Islamic tradition, it's full of good, honourable men, especially in the Sufi tradition, that are constantly trying to fight against their egos. Constantly. Even in the most innocent of ways. Like I read the other day that some of these scholars, or they're not scholars, they're devout men, they used to, like something, like if they felt thirsty, they used to not drink there and then. Scared that if they did do that, quench their thirst there and then, that they would teach their soul or teach themselves to obey their desires. And so they would delay drinking water when they're thirsty. That's how vigilant they were. That's how aware and mindful they were of pitfalls of the soul. A lot of us, we don't see our self and our ego in that way. We self-identify with it. Some of us are very proud of it. You know, certainly we live in a culture where self-awareness isn't necessarily a tool to become better, but just to showcase who you are. And that, you know, this is who I am and I'm proud of it, and society has to accept me the way I am, even if the way you are is a complete utter loser. Islam doesn't teach that. Islam and God does not teach this. God says you're a loser when you continuously self-serve. That honor comes from going against your own desires and denying yourself them. So it's completely contrary to contemporary understanding of self-celebration. To showcase oneself, to use this world as a catwalk, and for you to just go out there and strut. This is not a sign of wellness or well-being. It's contrary to it. You don't behave how you want, and you certainly do not celebrate your flaws. And I'm not talking about in the sense of, stretch marks and having a crooked nose and whatever. These things are insignificant and they're very superficial. I'm talking about the faults that you have inside if you're unable to take criticism, if you're too sensitive, it's because you're proud. If you're angry, if you have an inclination to lie or to cheat, if you seek others' approval too much, these are all indications that you're moving away from God and towards your self-worship. And so this state, you might feel really good about yourself because we live in a society that celebrates this type of people, and you can get a lot of likes and a lot of followers and no one bothers you. I'll tell you something about people. They will cheer you on to self-destruction if you let them. So it doesn't matter how you feel in this state. If this state makes you feel happy because you are fulfilling all your whims and desires and you feel good, that's still a negative state of well-being because you are going against God and you are putting yourself at risk in the other life. And so you're in a negative state of well-being, even if you're laughing your head off every single day. It is considered a negative state. And then the second state is, I just want to remind you, second state doesn't mean you go from this to that. It doesn't work like that. But the second state that I want to talk about is the nafs al-lawama, the self-reproaching state. In this state, a human being feels uncomfortable, feels anxious, feels irritated, feels like something's amiss, because in this state, you are in a power struggle. You are between wanting to go closer to God and to move forward in a spiritual sense, but this world is holding you back. You are between letting go and being attached, and it's a struggle. You know what you should do, but you can't do it. You are chained or held back by success, by wanting success, power, money, girls, guys, whatever it is. You can't shake it off. You can't choose a side. The goodness inside you does not let you sit in and lavish in your desires. But there is some fault inside you that prevents you from completely rejecting it. And in the Islamic understanding, that's why you feel anxiety and a bit sad and fed up. And in this state is better. Being in the state is better than being in the first state I spoke about, which is al-nafs al-ammara, the commanding state. Although the feelings are quote unquote negative, it's still a better state of wellness from an Islamic perspective than the first state, where you are completely giving in to your desires, feeling really, really, really good about it, but it's no good because it's contrary to what God wants. And so being in the second state is better because there is an awareness, and it's subconscious. It's subconscious because you don't necessarily know that your feelings are due to this tug of war that's happening inside between good and bad and wanting to let go but feeling so attached. But it's a better state to be in. So you can see in Islam straight away, feelings are not necessarily an indication of whether you're doing something good or not, if you're in a good state or not. There's a verse in the Quran that says وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And be careful that you may hate something that is good for you or love something that is bad for you. and God knows, and you do not know. So I'm not saying feelings are never an indication of whether you're doing something right or wrong, but it shouldn't be taken as the only indication of that. Imam al-Ghazali says, "The struggle against the soul creates much anguish, but those who can bear the bitterness of the process will eventually feel felicity." And you can certainly see that in your own life when you know that something is controlling you. So for example, even if it's something subtle where if you hate someone and they keep making fun of you, and so you dedicate your whole life to trying to prove them wrong and trying to show them that you're fine and you're happy, not knowing that you actually doing that makes them even more in control of you, because they're controlling how you behave and how you think about life and what you do, because everything you do to prove them wrong is an example of how they're controlling your behavior and what you buy and how you spend your money and how you see yourself. And so when you eventually realize that and you free yourself of that judgment, you feel good about yourself, because you know that you went against your ego and your ego's desire to stick it to them and to show yourself as better through very superficial means. When you go against that, you feel like you've accomplished something good, that there is a form of enlightenment, that you have elevated yourself from the rubbish, in a spiritual sense, of course, in a sense that brings you honor and respect. And the third state is an-nafs al-mutma'inna, which is the tranquil soul. Now, in this state, the soul is at peace, completely submitted to the will of God. In fact, Al-Ghazali says that in this state, a person doesn't even have the feelings of hope, because hope indicates that there is a desire for something in the future. And of course, there's no anxiety or sadness, because you accept all that's happened to you in the past as being God's decree, and you accept the future as well, whatever it brings. And of course, reaching this state of submission is a spiritual journey, but it is also a journey of self-development and strength, because you can't reach this state of being content and unafraid of the future without knowing that your faith is strong enough to withstand whatever comes your way. And that requires, again, spiritual enhancement, of course, and development, but it also requires resilience and courage. And of course, I think you reach this stage through age and experience. You eventually go through enough troubles to know that nothing lasts forever, and that essentially, if you are patient and quite courageous in the face of your problems, they will pass. Now, the fourth aspect is the spirit. I'm not going to say too much about the spirit, just because God says that there's not much you know about the spirit. But I will read to you what Al-Ghazali says about it. So the spirit is understood as being the powerhouse or the power source that connects you to God. The spirit is responsible for aiding the spiritual development, which manifests through the soul. And within the context of well-being, Al-Ghazali explains that the spirit, now this is so nice, listen to this, that the spirit is said to yearn for its return to its heavenly home. This longing can manifest through feelings of emptiness within the human, which cannot be satisfied except when an individual engages in the remembrance of God. Thus, it is believed that the remembrance of God is the only way that the individual finds peace in the true sense of the word. So the spirit is aware of the heavenly realm. It knows where it's come from, and it's unsatisfied with being here, because it must be really pale in comparison. And so it's always in a state of agitation and does not find peace until it's connected to its source, which is God. And that's why the remembrance of God brings peace. Now, the fifth aspect and the final aspect is the body. I'm not going to say too much about the body because so much is out there about the body in the contemporary understandings of well-being. You already know about nutrition and exercise and the likes. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. However, I do want to point out that the body is viewed as an earthly receptacle or container through which man can carry out God's worship. And so the state of the body is linked to the state of the spirit and the soul and the heart and the intellect. Al-Ghazali explains that the state of body is a physical manifestation of the state of the heart and the soul, and that the negative state of the body can further compound sickness in the heart or soul in that kind of like feedback mechanism. And I also want to point out a nod towards whatever you find in the contemporary understandings about well-being with regard to the body. So in the Quran, you can see that the Prophet Ayub, he calls out to Allah. He says, "Indeed, shaitan has touched me with hardness and torment." And Allah responds to this complaint by saying, "Strike the ground with your feet. This is a cool bath and drink." So God says, strike the ground, like go for a run. And here, have a cool bath and drink some cool water to get rid of the anxiety and hardship that shaitan has touched you with. So that's a nod to that, and specifically a nod to running and having cool baths. And I'm sure there's a lot of information out there about how cool baths make you enhance your feelings, your positive feelings. So that's a nod to that. Yeah, so these are the 5 aspects. And this is also linked to the second part that I want to discuss in the upcoming episode about human purpose, which is to do with the role of a Khalifa and the covenant. And it's connected to, well, it's really where everything starts. It's like the beginning of your story, way before you came into this world. And it starts off with a covenant, with a promise that you made to God about why you are here, with regards to why you are here in the first place. And I'm telling you, this verse or this concept of the covenant was something that blew me away when I first heard of it. I was so surprised. I honestly thought that I had been robbed because I hadn't been taught about it properly before. And the verse goes, it's Surah 7, Ayah 172, and it says, "And when thy Lord took from the children of Adam, from their loins, their progeny, and made them bear witness concerning themselves, Am I not your Lord? They said, Yeah, we bear witness. Lest you should say on the day of the resurrection, Truly of this we were heedless." So this is God explaining that all of the children of Adam were brought together, and God asked them, "Am I not your Lord?" And we all said yes, and God said, "Good." So this will be evidence against you on the day of judgment, lest you say I was heedless, that I didn't know about this, when you did know about it. And of course, I know you're thinking, well, I don't know about it, I don't remember doing that. But innately, subconsciously, you do. That's where your agitation comes from. That's why there's a feeling inside you that there's more to life than just this. That's why there's a feeling of peace when you are engaging in the truth, with the truth, especially the truth of God, because it speaks to your heart. Because deep down you know it to be true. There is comfort in it because you know it to be true. And you can further prop up this concept of engaging with God and knowing why you're here with other verses of the Quran. So there's a verse in the Quran that says that God asked the heavens and the earth if they would take the trust, the amana. And the heavens and the earth said, no, we won't. And this is the trust of being God's representative or Khalifa on earth. And then God said, and we turned to mankind, and they agreed to do it. So it's Surah 33, Ayah 72. It says, indeed we offered the trust to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they declined to bear it and feared it, but man undertook it. Indeed, he was unjust and ignorant. So even in that, the fact that we agreed to take on this trust, it was considered to be a foolish thing to agree to, because it is a difficult task. Because it's a task that is full of anxiety and suffering, and it takes a lot to overcome one's desire and oneself and to walk on the path of God. It is difficult. It is supposed to be difficult. It is difficult in nature. It's so difficult that when human beings agreed to take it on, they were called fools. But it makes sense, this concept of the covenant, of you agreeing to be here in the first place, because you hear a lot of people say, I didn't ask for this life. I didn't ask to be here. This is not fair. I didn't ask to go through all of this and then for God to take me to account over something I didn't agree with. And yeah, those things are right. It wouldn't have been fair. But you did agree to it. And that's why you're going to be taken to account for it, because you agreed to it and you gave a covenant. You just don't remember it in a way where it's there in your head, but it's definitely there in your heart. And the closer you get to God, the closer you understand your human purpose. Now, within the Islamic tradition, there's also an understanding that, yes, we all have a general purpose, which is the worship of God, but then each one of us has a particular purpose that they have to fulfill. That's something they promise God to fulfill. And the more you walk in that path, the more at peace you feel. You know, we call it your calling. You know that phrase, that this is my calling? Because it's something you don't know why, but you feel a sense of peace when you are doing it. And no matter how difficult it gets, you continue to do it. Because you know that it's just something you're supposed to do. And this is in line with your covenant to God. And that's where that sense of peace and determination comes from. And your determination increases when your proximity to God increases, because it's something to do with God. And anything that takes you towards God and the fulfillment of your purpose brings you peace. And the covenant is closely related to the role of Khalifa, which has a lot of ethics and morality attached to it. And these ethics and morality are on two levels: on a personal level in terms of character building, and on a communal level in terms of enjoining good and forbidding evil. But we'll go into a lot more detail in the next episode of the Insane podcast. For now, I just want to leave it at that. I hope that this episode has been informative and helpful to you. Do remember your brothers and sisters in Palestine. Pray for them, pray for yourselves. And until our next episode, you make sure you do take care.